being paid, and to ensure that records retention is being conducted in accordance with the requirements of Schedule EV1. So on the work that was performed, there were no current findings for the past year, which is great, which gives kudos to Dr. Gallo and her incredibly credible department. Great cooperation. And then the report also addresses audit report recommendations from 2015, which those recommendations were implemented or taken care of at that time. So if there's any questions or the work that was performed.
Any questions from the board? Yeah, this looks pretty clean.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thanks, you too. Thank you, Ms. Gallo. Dr. Gallo, I'm sorry. No. Okay, moving on. Board of Education accepts the minutes of the Board of Education meetings held on October 11th and October 25th, 2017, as detailed in the Friday mailing. Moved by Mrs. Reed.
Second.
Second by Mrs. O'Hagan. Are there any questions or comments? Nope. All those in favor? Aye. Board of Education acknowledges receipt of the Treasurer's report for September 2017 as detailed in the Friday mailing. Moved by Mrs. Reed.
Second.
Second by Mrs. O'Hagan. Are there any questions or comments? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. At this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Dr. Camden.
I think that's loud enough. So we have one change in our agenda. The fire marshal had an emergency, and so he was unable to present tonight, but he will be on a future agenda. A couple of years ago, 2 years ago, we changed the format of our Hastings Academy. Hastings Academy is an alternative program for high school students in our district. And 2 years ago, we changed it so that it's a collaborative with Nassau BOCES. So tonight we have a presentation by our Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Mignella, about the new Hastings program, how it's set up, and what the components of the program are. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mignella.
Good evening, everyone. If you don't mind, use my microphone and speaking out loud enough. So, it's a privilege of mine to speak about the redesigned Hastings Academy. Tonight we'll go over the goals of the program, the structure of the program, and some highlights of the courses. So we'll start with the goals of the program. And the program is designed to allow students to be more successful in that non-traditional environment. And what we're finding is due to our blended environment that was created, it consists of online courses, personalized learning with a teacher, and of course our CTE courses, that's the combination with OC's program. Students are really able to demonstrate growth success. We've had students go from 0 credits to 12 credits in 1 year due to this blended environment, and students are becoming really excited about coursework because it's relevant to them. They're able to select one of these personalized learning programs pathways that I'll show you. So the schedule is also very unique. What we find a lot of students are not doing well, sometimes they cannot get up by 7 in the morning with school to high school. So our program at Hastings starts at 9:30. This particular course, Apex, is an online learning course. So students are able to come in at 9:30 and start to earn credit back where they've met a course credit. And it's individualized, so something I have to take is something very different than everyone in this room would have to take. So right now it's about 20, 25 students that need to cover some credit. We have about 48, 49 students in the program currently, which is actually an increase from last year. So the program is growing. Students are going, they're working with support, they're working independently, individually on their credit recovery. Then the freshman students arrive first period at 10:15. There's 2 periods in the morning, 10:15, 11:45. Those are their required high school graduation courses that they need to take. Typically, those are the courses that accumulate in their Regents exam, such as living environments or earth science. It could be their U.S. history and government class, whatever they need for graduation. Then they have a lunch, and the lunch is actually closed campus, so they stay in-house. They go in the back, there's some beautiful tables set up so they get some fresh air. Then they start their CTE courses. And in collaboration with BOCES, we've developed 3 unique courses, all that allow students to leave with a certificate in one of these areas. So upon completion, they can go to college. They're still going to be college bound. Last year, 10 students did graduate from the BOCES program, which is fantastic. But they also have the opportunity to go directly into the workforce, work, as well as attend college. So they have extra opportunities. Our courses are medical administrative assistant, that's a brand new one that we just started this year, barbering, and police science. So that's about from 12:15 to 2:45, and then they continue with some twilight courses. Well, twilight is after normal hours, but this is a continuation of required high school courses that we need for graduation. So first, our barbering course. This is a favorite, I go all the time. So this course is a combination of classroom experience plus practical laboratory work. So students are learning the practices in the classroom, and they actually get to go and work with mannequins at first. As they progress through working on a mannequin, they actually work on each other, and the door is open for clients. The students are going to be set up for job embedded internship work, where they continue to work on clients. The curriculum is really designed to allow them to learn the industry, learn about the importance of shaving, haircutting, sanitation, safety, but it'll give them the opportunity to work with somebody in a barbershop or hopefully open their own business if they're so inclined. So they also learn some of the business components of running their own barbershop. In order to complete this course, students need to earn a total of 500 hours of practical experience. So it's not just the lab work, the classroom work, they have to have 500 hours. So some students are able to finish in a year. Typically, you find about a year and a half to complete all the hours they need to be eligible to take their certification exam. Once they take their certification exam, they also have to be 17 years old. Upon completion, they can really seek employment. So we really have some seniors who are ready to work locally, cutting hair, earning money, and living, right? Then they can pay their way for college, hopefully, and a few stuff. So that's our barbering program. The next program is our police science program. This is a 2-year course, and students are learning what it means to run private security, potentially work in the police force. They learn about mock trials. The instructor is actually a former attorney, so they have relevance, rigor. They're actually able to relate to the course. They went to college trips, John Jay recently, experienced what it's like, so they're trying to become aware also of the next steps following high school. All right, these students, as you heard me say, some career opportunities, but they can also go directly into the 8-hour security guard course or 16-hour security guard course. So they have certificates to work right away. Our dad will might be hiring you for his client. So it's just a wonderful opportunity for the students to, again, earn a certificate and go to college. So this class is very interesting. It's our new program. Last year we offered a coding, a gaming course. We was looking more over like coding, but we found students are not that interested in it. And again, we want to make it relevant to them and have them really excited about attending school. So after the survey was conducted, we decided to go with this medical administrative assistant course. And this is actually a great one because upon completion of this particular program, the student could work at the front desk of doctor's office. So they're learning the coding for medical billing, they're learning all the Microsoft application suites, medical terminology. Right now, you'll see it's not a great picture, you see in the bottom corner, you have students wearing their stripes. So every student has their name on a scrub. And students are very excited about it. They're walking the halls, and they're very proud of the hire that they were given these opportunities. This is a 2-year course also, as I mentioned before, and they will have to take a medical administrative assistant state certification test, competition, to be able to work in a doctor's office. And And they've also taken the Knox exam. The Knox exam is really just an exam that's been approved by the state that demonstrates that the student is ready to enter the workforce. It's really covering the skills that they learned during these CTE courses. All right. This next slide just shows some pictures of students in action during the Twilight courses. In our science class, top left corner, we have students studying butterflies. On the right side here, these are some students in the forensics class that were going out, working on their forensic files, starting a forensic class of the science course to use for graduation. Bottom left is, it looks like another science class, potentially earth science. So, it shows how students are getting involved and getting excited about their field. Another big part of the program, our students are growing not only academically, but also growing socially and emotionally. We really want to make sure that they have those other components as well. So this slide shows how the Hastings program developed a sense of community. We know the program's flourishing. Last year, there were about 32, 34 students enrolled, and then this year, about 48, 49%. So there's greater interest for students to enter the program. You see some students being honored from their Student of the Month Award, students that were graduating in the middle two slides, and that was just a holiday breakfast that the staff introduced through to the students. All right, this last slide here, I don't know if you saw it, but the borrowing program was filmed by Channel 12 News last year. So I'm going to show you the news segment and show the students in action.
Well, a high school course being taught in Baldwin is helping some students be a cut above the rest.
Yes, you'll understand that pun there when Ms. Long Island tells us the story with those students.
This barbershop is really busy today. But wait a minute, it really isn't a barbershop. It's part of Nassau BOCE's Twilight program at the Hastings campus in Baldwin. The students are being given an opportunity to prepare for jobs and careers before and after high school graduation. Shania Webb has always enjoyed creating new hairstyles since her Barbie doll days.
It's really supposed to be boys' hair, but since I'm into girls' hair, he lets me do my little thing from the side with girls' hair, and then I do my barbing on the mannequin for the boys as well.
Looks like Pedro Duran styled his own hair.
The first time I was confused, and that was kind of difficult, but then I used go with the flow, you know what I'm saying? I started practicing more, and then I got better, you know what I'm saying?
And you want to have your own business idea?
Yeah, future.
We have gaming and police science, and those are all the in-district programs here at the Baldwin campus.
Well, Ralph Andre is doing right here. They have about 14 students involved in the course, and this is the first time it's being offered here at the school. Ralph, how's it coming along?
Well, wait a minute, I didn't mean you to cut all of that off.
I think it's gonna take me far. I'm gonna have lots of money soon, real soon.
In Baldwin, Ken Grimble, News 12, Long Island.
Any questions?
So is there a cap in the classes that the students can attend? So
We're pretty full capacity at this point in time. There's 16 chairs in the barbering class, so we can exceed that capacity. The police science class has a little more room, because they are in a classroom, and they do their hands-on experience. And the medical assistant program, so that's a newer one, it's still growing, there's still some space in there. But I think the capacity of that class will be about 20 when we're fully enrolled in that class. There's about 12 students currently enrolled in that class now.
okay, for the medical assistant.
Right.
And what about the numbers for the other classes? Are you not sure? Okay, that's okay.
I know the barbering is.
Of course, it's very popular.
Right.
Yeah. Anybody else have a question? Oh, go ahead. I had another one. Do you think we can get that clip on the website? Do we have access to that?
Kind of old at this point. We have some more clips coming.
Okay. It's just kind of a cool, thing. I don't remember seeing them before, so. What type of online courses are they taking?
So that depends on the students and the students' individual needs. Most of our elective courses at the graduation.
Okay.
Some students are taking that participation in government, economics, which is requirements. Some are taking that additional math class, which is requirements. So it really depends on the student's individual profile. So, in August, 15 works, and they will decide on what courses the students graduation and the level of risk percentage.
Now, is it just their own independent courses, or it's one where there's an actual instructor?
No, Apex is designed to be an independent course, but they are providing support of the course.
Okay.
So there is a teacher there that can turn to, during the private hours, so you get some one-to-one. There is a teacher that supervises them during the Apex component, supervises as well, so there is someone there. So as needed, it definitely seeks help during time.
I think it's important to recognize too that the program is designed around the kids. So there are students who are not part of the APEX program because they don't need the credit recovery.
Got it.
There are students who come in for CTE and the Twilight Hour courses, but are not part of APEX.
Okay, that makes more sense, thank you.
So since we've partnered with BOCES, this is BOCES aidable, correct?
Correct.
So we do get,
From that noon hour on,
Uh-huh.
and there are different rates depending upon which service, which program it is, but from noon on, that entire piece is aidable.
Okay, so that means we're getting money back.
Correct.
Okay.
Why is the part before that not aidable?
So BOCES personnel, their contract does not allow for BOCES personnel to teach off-campus before that hour.
Okay,
So it's a contractual issue with BOCES.
okay. Any questions? No?
I have just a couple of questions. Is there an internship opportunity for some of these kids?
Yes, it's a work-based learning portion of the program also, so once students are ready on the field, both these help us place students in the location. So the hope is for all students in all three of those CTE programs that we discussed today would have the opportunity to do an internship or a work-based learning.
And my other question is, I know you said they take regular academic classes that they might need to get a Regents diploma. What about labs?
So the science classes that require lab hours is included in the Twilight program. So when we look at the Twilight courses from 2:45 to 4:15, that's when lab hours.
How do they take them up at the high school then?
They take them here, they have a lot of equipment.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay. Okay.
Everything is done in-house.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the things I think is important to recognize is that because the program is small, it really has become a family. The kids all know each other. And that, I think, is one of the things that makes the program a success, because they develop relationships with each other, and just like families, argue sometimes. But the program itself, is something that we've grown into. We've made lots of tweaks over the last year, and this year we expect we'll probably make more tweaks next year. We are really rebranding the program, and there's a potential for another partner in that program, which once it's finalized, we'll actually announce. So, there's still lots to happen with that program, but it is a one of its kind. There's no other program like that anywhere.
Is it physical capacity? Is there a point at which we couldn't add more students just because of the physical restrictions of the building?
Yeah, there's just so many classrooms that we have available.
Okay.
I would love to see us get to the point where we need to add some classrooms on so that we can expand the CTE possibilities.
One more thing. I don't know if Mr. Press gave you the booklet from when we were, and there was a section in there on the barbering curriculum. I don't know. I'm just curious to know if there is a mirror in terms of the program that we're offering. inside of that program. I found it interesting because I was like, wow, an actual curriculum for barbering and testing out, so I don't know, I'm just
Sometimes
curious.
it doesn't work. I mean,
Yeah, well, just cut it all off.
yeah, no, so if we think back to the old days of vocational ed, it is not like that. It's a completely different way of doing things. The programs that we chose and that we offer, there are certain things they have in common, right? So the program, our expectation is that all of our students are ready for college. That is an expectation. So the rigor is there. It's up to those kids to choose whether or not they go on to college full-time, if they go on to college part-time, or if they feel like they need a little bit of break for a while. All of those 3 CTE programs culminate in certification in something so that they have the credentials to work part-time or full-time. And so the curriculum is, it's not a New York State curriculum, but it is a fairly standardized CTE curriculum from across the state, because remember too that it has to meet the requirements to take that test.
Would they segue, I mean, I think one of the things we also talk or learn about in the CTE education session was how some of the CTE courses segue into or provide a pathway for kids to continue on in college. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious, I mean, I know if they're getting the certificate, I guess that kind of, they don't really kind of need to finish on, but I don't know. I mean, how does that work?
So these would culminate in that certificate. Again, I won't jump the gun yet, but we're working on another alternative program that would do exactly that. That would allow kids to take coursework in their high school program that would be a natural transition into a full-fledged college program. But there's still a lot of things for us to do to finalize that.
Okay. No other questions? Thank you very much. The floor is still yours.
Yeah, thanks. So if you can believe it, it's 2 weeks to Thanksgiving. You know, I think it's kind of a across the board, you have to be kidding moment. Yeah. 2 weeks.
I saw Christmas lights on someone's house.
Oh, goodness. And that probably has something to do with the 65-degree weather, but it's been I think a very exciting couple of months, but particularly this last month, we had some interesting visitors and some interesting events. One is our first ever elected officials day for our students. We had a number of state and county and town legislators who came to our high school and sat with our high school students, about 25 of our high school students. And it was the high school students forum where they got to share with our elected officials what their hopes and dreams for the future are, what their questions and concerns for the future are. And that, I think, comes from a philosophy of, if these are my elected officials and they are making decisions, they need to know what this generation is thinking. And so that was a first of its kind, very well received by both the elected officials and our students. And as usual, our students were so impressive that our legislators left speechless at not only how prepared our kids were, but how incredibly bright and thoughtful they were at their commentary and their questions. So that was wonderful, and that was followed up by the next night, which was the PTA's legislative forum, where some of the same people were there. That was a complete coincidence. But that was actually beautifully timed that they were a day apart. Today we had signing day at the high school. It's an absolute joy to sit with some of our athletes and see the colleges that they're moving on to and the opportunities that they have. If you've not had an opportunity, it will be on News 12 tonight. And it was on News, so you saw it? It was on News 12. ESPN is going to share some of the photos on their Facebook page and website. ESPN. We had two visitors this past week. We had the Chancellor of the State of New York, Betty Rosa, come visit our district. So she gets to be added to the growing list of state officials and local officials who have come to see the kinds of things that are happening in Baldwin. And if you've not had a chance, that was covered by News 12. It was a really, really good visit. Unfortunately, we only had an hour and a half of her time, and each class she went into, we had to shuffle them out, and Regent Roger Tillis was with her, and they wanted to stay longer, and I had the opportunity to say, well, I asked her for 3 hours, you only gave me an hour and a half, so we need to move on. But she has asked to come back so that she can visit our middle school and our elementary schools. It was a great opportunity for, again, the highest level of education officials to see the kinds of things happening in Baldwin, and they walk away with a lot of opportunity to think about things differently. And I can say it's a point of pride for me personally that that thinking is happening as a result of their visits here. So that was one of our visitors this past week. That was on Monday. We also had Dr. Alan Serra, who is the Dean of the School of Education and Information Science for CW Post, come visit us this week. And he is going to follow up that visit with a group of faculty from their School of Education to see what K-12 education looks like so that their professors can be more contemporary in what pre-service teachers need to be engaged in before they complete their degrees as certified teachers. So that'll be a follow-up visit with the folks from CW Post. Lastly, we've had many visits at this point from Newsday and FiOS and News 12. They are visiting us again tomorrow to share, Trish is laughing because they're going to be visiting her class, but they are intrigued by the work that we are doing with our redesigned learning spaces. And so tomorrow at least, News 12 and FiOS, News 12 and Newsday will be there to do an article and some coverage about not just the physicalness of our redesigned learning spaces, but the relationship between that and the type of learning that's happening in our classrooms, and how that is impacting students. And so we get to be the school district on the leading edge of that kind of thinking. So they will be here again tomorrow. Last, I just want to officially welcome Anthony DeLuca, who's back here, as our new supervisor of operations. I think we can probably extend Russ's life by like 10 or 15 years by giving him the help that he so deserves. So welcome, Anthony. Anthony uses the same barber as Anthony. So it's the Anthony's barber. So that's all I have.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, Anthony's new to the position, but not at all new to the district. He knows this district like the back of his hand. I think he's worked in almost every building, yeah? Just about.
And,
so,
as a parent in our district as well.
Yes.
His kids go to school.
So, welcome. And a graduate.
Yes, ma'am.
Wow. Okay. Were you born here too?
No.
Oh. All right. We try. Okay. Good enough. All right. This is now the section of our meeting where we have comments and reports from the Board of Education. Last month we were at the New York State School Boards Association annual convention, which is a couple of days of professional development for board members. And so as part of this part of our meeting, we talked about having the board talk briefly about a couple of the sessions or a couple of things that they took away from the meeting. So you guys in the community can see what it is that we're doing when we go away. And I will say, I think the community here, I think, is very fortunate. Our entire board went up. And some schools don't send anyone, some schools send a small number. So we're all going up there and we're trying to spread ourselves out to cover as many topics as we can so that we can bring back as much knowledge as we can to use here in the community. And we're going to meet later this month. We're going to have a work session. We're going to try to talk in a little bit more detail about some of the things that we may share with you tonight. So I'm going to start. I should keep track. Okay, that's what I thought. And I'm going to start down here with Mrs. Cools. Unless you want to pass. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. So, very loud. So, a few of the things I attended at the convention, besides just a standard work session, was I went in to listen to the New York State Commissioner of Education, Mary Ellen Elia, talk about some different things that are going on, up with her, up there. And there's actually quite a lot going on. So there no more No Child Left Behind, like she doesn't even want that term used anymore. It's now called Every Student Succeeds. So there are new programs being put together, new standards, I should say. And in the spring of 2021 will be the first full assessment of these new standards, but that's jumping ahead. So some of the details of these new standards: testing days will be 2 days, not 3, and will be on current standards, that, the curriculum that we have now, until this gets a few years down the road, and then they'll slowly progress it into the new standards. Every question on these new tests, starting this year, will be written by New York State teachers. They are really trying to get away from and in fact discourage too much mentality on test prep. They are now saying that that's not, this is really loud, right? They are now saying that that's not good teaching. They're really trying to move away from that. They want the focus to be on comprehension, not time limit. Now, Dr. Presti is wanting to know what planet I was on when I heard all this? Okay. So that was some of the things that I listened to. She sounded very enthused. Again, that hasn't yet trickled down to as many places as it needs to yet, but in time. So, but the good thing is they are maybe recognizing some of the mistakes that were made and trying to get away from some of the mistakes that were made and moving on in a positive way. Also, they did want us to know that New York State anticipates many families displaced from devastated areas are going to end up in New York. So, they have no idea yet the full impact or numbers, but they do anticipate that will impact us. And I guess ultimately, them, as well as us, are all hoping that these changes will decrease the opt-out rates, because that's just not something that's working out well for anybody. So we are hoping that in fact will happen. I also attended a class on substance abuse and the heroin epidemic, which we all know is rampant, and there's, in my opinion, there's not too much that we can do. I'm not saying that. We can't do enough. That's what I meant, yeah. We cannot do enough to educate and to get all of this information out there for not only our students, but parents, grandparents. Everybody needs this information. So hopefully we'll all start to see more programs, not even just in the school districts, but in the communities, in order to help everybody. And on a last note, so there is a company called Armored One, and I went to their seminar last year as well and spoke about it in my report. And I guess coming from a family of first responders, I kind of, tend to go toward things like this. I can really, fully understand the information. So this company goes around all over the country. They're based in upstate New York, and they're a SWAT team-based company. They're ex-military, and some of them are even still current SWAT. And they not only go to businesses and schools, and apparently now they'll have to go to churches, and show them what they can do as far as bulletproof glass and special locks on the doors, but also to educate and to train everybody on not only the staff on how to handle the situations should they happen, but to teach all of us, right? Because any one of us, unfortunately, could be caught in a bad situation. And I don't know about you guys, but since my kids were little, I just automatically, whenever I would go anywhere, the first thing I would do was look for the exits. Do any of you guys ever do that? Right. So, I think as parents, our mind kind of goes there. So along those lines, this is something that they are teaching, and I found it very interesting. So just like your mind goes right to that thought, exit, where's the exits? That your mind should also keep something, put back there and hopefully never need to be used. But run, hide, fight. That's simple. Run, hide, fight. Well, what does that mean? Well, that's something that, God forbid you ever find yourself in a bad situation, you can immediately think, run, hide, fight. And what is that? That's an assessment. That is an instant assessment of the situation that you are finding yourself in at that moment. So run. If you are in a situation where the perpetrator is somewhat of a distance from you in another part of the building, in another room, you can run, right? You can probably pretty safely run. If they're closer, then you think hide, right? Because if they're a little closer and you try to run, unfortunately, that's going to have a bad result, more than likely. So run, hide, and fight. If somebody's right in the room with you or right next to you, I guess at that moment you have to think about and decide if you're the person to do this, but one person grabbing a hold of somebody and tackling them, maybe even resulting in the injury of that one person, could save the other 50 in that room. So, and they also talk about that, how many people they've dealt with that have been in these situations and didn't do that, and, and unfortunately make statements to the effect of they wish they would have, just, so it's unfortunate, and I hate that we even have to talk about this, but something like that just kept in the back of your mind could one day save your life. That's all I've got.
I made a point of visiting a variety of workshops, many of which were on topics that I was familiar with, but sometimes it's really good to kind of update yourself or take another look and see if, in fact, what I think I know is still the case. For example, I went to a workshop on contracts, and on the new, whatever is new in negotiating contracts. And I went to a couple of different workshops on CTE and what other districts are doing to promote career and technical education. And I went to a workshop on facilities that support instruction and new educational spaces. So I came away with a very comfortable feeling that we're really ahead of the curve in a lot of cases. and certainly very much in sync with what's going on with the rest of the state. I just wanted to mention, I think we all, any of us that attended the keynote speaker, really enjoyed his presentation. He happened to be extremely funny, in addition to very much on point. But the thrust of his speech was about what a terrible mistake the entire world is making by emphasizing testing and using that as a comparison to compare countries, to compare school districts. And he used the expression that we are all sausage makers, that we attempt to take every child and fit them into a particular mold, and that's the absolute opposite of what we should be doing. We should be nurturing individual talents, we should be nurturing creativity, and that the constant emphasis is really a mistake. It was I thought it was a terrific presentation. And I have to say that the one thing that I came away with that I was really excited, and I'm going to nag my colleagues about, was a couple of pieces of technology that were really, really exciting. There's so much going on in the world of technology. This happened to be some virtual opportunities, and it's just amazing. And what education will look like in another 5 years or 10 years is astonishing. So that was the part that I came away with. I thought that I really need to find some more about. I need to educate myself more about the opportunities with technology. That's it.
You got to go last, is that what you're saying? Good evening, everyone. For me, I guess my focus was more about conversations on improving communication within the community, as well as strategic goals and measurements, and also the board relationship and board effectiveness. Those were the various workshops that I attended, and also some legal aspects in terms of how meetings should be held. Exactly like Ms. O'Hagan said, just making sure. I felt I needed an update still now 3 years into the board, this position, but just really making sure I understood how certain things took place. What was, rather than going into detail of everything, I think what was truly inspiring was, one, the theme was taking education to new heights. That was the theme of the actual conference. But attending these workshops, I felt really good that we were doing a lot of things right. That was really the takeaway for me. A lot of what was already being done and what different districts were speaking of from a board perspective, I thought we were doing a really great job how we communicate amongst each other. The area that was more eye-opening was hearing how other people handle how they communicate within their district. And one thing that came out was a district that talked about how we do our community input meeting. They actually do a teletown hall, so they actually have people on the phone and call in to actually do their community input meeting, and they were saying how they had several people that it increased the participation, but just hearing how something happened differently in a different district works for them. But the ultimate goal was having a conversation about different ways as to how we can communicate. And of course, we have our community input meeting, which that was the focus, was how do we communicate in a better way. I think there's still some great dialogue that we can have in terms of how we can improve these seats and have more people attend, have more attendant people come out for elections and so forth, and just getting information across at different important events that we have. But overall, I thought it was a great conference, and as I said, it was just more inspiring to know that we were doing things right. So that's what I got out of it.
So, for those of you who don't know, I don't know if we mentioned the location of our conference. It was in Lake Placid, which was phenomenal to be there at this time of the year. The foliage was beautiful. Everyone there was very, very, very nice. And we got to visit some of the historic Olympic sites, which was like cool, for lack of a better word. It was just very cool. I attended several sessions as well as my colleagues. I went to a session on career and technical education, data-driven, how to become more data-driven district. I also attended a workshop on strategies for improving student achievement. But the one that was really interesting to me, since we just added a STEAM teacher for the elementary buildings, was robotics in elementary. And so this workshop was given, this education session was, the presenter was a female engineer who turned into an educator. And so that was like a really cool, like here you have this female engineer who decides to give it all up and become a teacher with little kids. And so this district is Chester Union Free School District. It's a small school district upstate. They have a 3-year plan as to how they are implementing their STEAM program. I'm not going to go too much into the details because I have workshop information here, but it was very interesting. They use Lego, and she wasn't making a plug for Lego per se, but they do, Lego has different kits for different age levels, and there was also this Dot and Dash, which was like for kindergarten, and first was just like a really introductory to coding. So it was a really interesting workshop, and there was a lot. You think about like what Mrs. O'Hagan said, where we're going with technology, and it was just very interesting to see how this is playing out into our curriculum. One of the things that she talked about was kind of refreshing the unit on pulleys and gears and machines, and so using the Lego, that she would give, assignments where, back in the day we would read in the book and we'd kind of learn about it, and then we kind of had those simple machines where you hang something on it and, that kind of thing, but now it's just so much more advanced. She talked about, they did a Real Work Connect where they had someone come in and do some work with prosthetics, and they showed how the robotics kind of that they were doing could be moved up to doing robotics or prosthetics. It was just a very interesting educational session. So, like I said, that was like the real biggie for me.
Thank you all. So yeah, I went through a number. I have notes on a number of things here. The things that stood out for me, again, it's come up a couple of times for the CTE sessions. And one of the things that stuck with me, that they said this was a session that was focused on the Syracuse School District, so huge district. They do their own CTE, whereas we generally send our kids to BOCES for the CTE. And they were talking about, at least now in that upstate area, where they have problems finding tradesmen to do work up there. And so, we're this focus on kind of college, we're forgetting like we need people to actually build stuff, and that's kind of important. And so there's a lack of that, I guess, at least in the upstate area. What else? The thing that I took away, so we drove up to Lake Placid together in a minivan, and I did the driving. So as a concession, my board member said, if there's one thing that you want to implement from this convention, go for it. So I think they might rue that decision. But I sat in a conference on board docs, and if you've been coming to meetings, I do a lot of stuff electronically. I'm sorry, Mary, for having you have to turn things into digital. But I like to do stuff here because that's the size of the materials that we get almost every month. And so board docs is this program that a number of boards use, where the stuff comes electronically, and everybody has a laptop, and so
Are you
I know.
good at that plug here?
There's a little bit of, it doesn't have to be board docs, but we can have further conversations. With